Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, and this week it comes from Jordan Blackwell, who covers Leicester City for Leicestershire Live, familiar face of the podcast. Jordan, welcome back. I'm very intrigued about this weekend. I'm hoping you're going to be able to give me the answers, although with Ruud van Nistelrooy only being in charge for 2 games, you might be unable to, but I'm sure you'll try your best. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you, Andrew. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm intrigued, like I say, about this weekend. I'm fearing it a little bit, but I'm hoping one of the answers you're going to give me about how Leicester will approach this game and the style of play might give me a little reason to be optimistic about Saturday, and that's where we'll start. The question everyone's asking is, how will Leicester play on Saturday? Will they hold on to the ball and try and control the game, or will they sit back and invite Newcastle on?
That's a very good question because I would say from Van Nistelrooy's first 2 games, it's not totally clear exactly how he wants to play and how much he wants to dominate the ball. Against West Ham, they played mostly on the counter-attack, but then they did take the lead in the second minute, and the way the game panned out, that was kind of the best approach. And obviously, because they are a newly promoted team, maybe keeping possession isn't, it's a bit more of a difficult task. But then against Brighton, they had 55% of the ball. They looked much more willing to play out from the back. Mads Hermansen was playing it a lot shorter. They were trying to build up play. And Van Nistelrooy said that he thought the performance against Brighton was better than the performance against West Ham, even though the result wasn't as good. Certainly defensively, it was better. They conceded a lot of chances against West Ham. I think West Ham had 31 shots and only scored 1 goal. But against Brighton, although they scored twice, I think Leicester managed to keep it down to sort of 15, 16. And actually, there weren't many clear-cut chances within that. So I would say, based on what he said, I think they probably will try to keep the ball, at least initially when the game's level. If it changes and they get an early goal or they go into the lead, then I think naturally they will change and they will try to play on the counter because they do have the players to play that way. It's Vardy's 37, but he still prefers to play that way. They've been playing Casey McAteer, who's more suited to that style of play as well, I would say. So, yeah, I think it is. You're right. It's an intriguing one. I'm not totally sure, but the signs so far say I think they will try to keep the ball.
Which will be music to the ears of Newcastle United fans, because when they have to watch their team dominate games in terms of possession, Newcastle United just are not very good at it. It's when they are at their worst, when they have to sit back and absorb pressure and then hit teams on the counter with the speed of your Gordons or your Isaacs. That's when Newcastle are at their best. So it's funny because I suspect if we'd still had Cooper in charge at Leicester and he was coming up with his team on Saturday, would that have been a kind of a sit back and absorb and hit on the counter performance or not?
I think so, yes. I think it wasn't always the plan under Cooper, but that was how generally it panned out, that they would have less of the ball and that they would try to play on the counter. But I have to say they weren't the performance against West Ham in Van Nistelrooy's first game. It was the most effective Leicester have been on the counter this season. They were the only games where they were probably better in attack was the games against Southampton and Ipswich, where they were playing against 10 men. So I think although Cooper wanted to play sort of faster, more direct counter-attacking football, he didn't quite make it work. And I think Van Nistelrooy's already shown signs that maybe he can, get it to, get Leicester sort of moving up the pitch more smoothly and generating more chances.
It's just really intriguing because when teams have that low block, Newcastle just can't seem to break them down. I just wonder while on one hand you have Ruud van Nistelrooy feeling his way into the job with the players and working out what he can do, you also have his principles, because over in Holland he was very attacking minded. But then he will, and his staff will do their homework. They would have looked at Newcastle, play against sides in and around them, in and around Leicester, down the bottom of the table, and look how they struggled against them when those teams sat back. So it's going to be really intriguing to see which route he goes down. Does he stick to his principles, or does he do kind of a mix of both? Because if he does turn up and tries to, do a possession kind of based 90 minutes or so, I know you said it might start that way and change, but even for 20 odd minutes, half an hour, Newcastle United fans will be rubbing their hands at that, because it would just be a kind of a deviation to what teams down the bottom have done. We saw West Ham sit back, and we've seen other teams do that. Whereas when Liverpool have the ball a couple of Wednesdays ago, Newcastle had to absorb the pressure, and they were great going forward on the counter. So it'd be really, really interesting to see what he does on Saturday. But talk to us about the impact of Ruud van Nistelrooy. I mean, he had a couple of games in charge at Manchester United, and then it's suddenly been parachuted into this job. A battle to keep Leicester in the Premier League, but a fantastic start so far. 4 points from a possible 6. So what improvements have you seen so far?
Well, I think the big sense is that he's someone that the players can have faith in. I just don't think, and it has been cited that, it was one of the reasons behind Cooper's sort of departure, is that he didn't quite connect with the players. And I think the feeling is that Van Nistelrooy will better be able to do that, maybe slightly more similar to Maresca, who obviously got the club promoted last season, who was very popular with the players. I think on the pitch, it's as I said, the improvements have been that when they did play in the counter against West Ham, it was probably their best attacking performance against 11 men this season. The Brighton game was one of their best defensive performances this season. But it's particularly interesting that and this might again give some hope to Newcastle supporters. He's changed the centre-back partnership. He's not made too many changes in terms of personnel, but he has changed the centre-back partnership. Wout Faes had started every league game for 13 months before Van Nistelrooy came in. Van Nistelrooy's come in, he's been dropped to the bench, and Van Nistelrooy started Cody and Vestergaard together, who of the 4 centre-backs Leicester have, they're the 2 most experienced. I would say in terms of defensive positioning and kind of tactical understanding of the game, they're probably the best 2 as well, but they are also the 2 slowest. And I don't think either West Ham or Brighton have necessarily exploited that yet, and sort of used their lack of pace. There's been a couple of moments where Vestergaard's tried to press out, not quite got it right, and opposition have got in behind him. But I think that probably is something to exploit as as you say, with Newcastle's quicker players like Gordon and Isak. So that'll be interesting to watch. I think other changes he's made, as mentioned, Casey McAteer's been playing. I think he'd only started 1 Premier League game in his career before this past week. He's started both of Van Nistelrooy's games. I think the choices between him and Mavididi, and at the minute McAteer is a kind of off the ball winger that he'll constantly make runs in behind and stretch the pitch a little bit, which it kind of gives Leicester that kind of, even when they do, against Brighton, even while they were keeping the ball and looking to keep possession, there were a few moments where McAteer would just make a run and they'd just drop it over the top to him. So I think they do like that variation. I think Van Nistelrooy likes that he will try and run and push the defence back, and therefore create more space for the likes of El Canouse and Buonanotte, the creative midfielders, sort of in those pockets of space. So, there's been a few interesting changes. I think the positivity among the fan base is back as well. And and there's a I think the feeling's a good one. I have to say the comeback that they had against Brighton, I think it was kind of a lot of that was attributed to the good feeling that Van Nistelrooy's brought. But I would say that was probably one of the strongest characteristics they had under Cooper as well. That actually there was a bit of a never say die attitude in the squad, and there've been a lot of games where they've come back from behind it and got a decent result. So that's something that the squad have at their disposal as well.
Well, I read your article from a couple of days ago about Leicester City's tendency to be stronger in the second half, and I think you wrote that they were 8th in the league when it comes to performances in the second 45 of a game. And I spoke about this on the match preview yesterday. That really does fill me with a little bit of dread, because Newcastle United, in the games in which you would have expected them to win, so you're looking at West Ham, who right down there and actually haven't picked up any form since beating Newcastle United, as Leicester fans know. And there are other examples, kind of like Everton and a few of the games, and when Newcastle have been really strong in the first half. Brentford last Saturday is another example, really strong in the first half. They come out in the second half and they're just a totally different side, look devoid of instruction, of confidence, and it's a running pattern. I do fear that we might see a repeat of what we have seen in recent weeks and months, when Newcastle United have had 4, 5 chances in the first half, haven't taken them, or even have maybe got one goal, and then the visiting side comes out in the second half and Newcastle drop off. And reading your article, I'm sure you'll be able to go into a little bit more detail in a second. It seems like there's a chance that could happen on Saturday, and that's why I'm fearing it a little bit.
Yeah, it's been really interesting actually, because I think probably the last time Leicester in the Premier League a couple of years ago when they were relegated, you wouldn't have said it was one of their strong suits at all, but they don't seem too put off by conceding, and it doesn't seem to knock their confidence or belief or anything like that. Whether it's just they're realistic about the situation that they're in, and that they know that they are going to concede goals and that they can't let that affect them in any way. That's a possibility. I'd be tempted to say that probably the experience they have among certain players probably helps them as well. They are a very experienced Premier League squad. Cooper during the summer was keen to bring in players with even more Premier League experience, even though they had a lot already. That's why they signed the likes of Jordan Ayew and Bobby De Cordova-Reid. The Ayew scored a couple of the late goals that they have scored to claim late results, and De Cordova-Reid obviously got the goal, the equaliser as well on Sunday against Brighton. They seem to have players that don't lose their cool and don't lose their composure in those moments at the end of games when the pressure is on. You've only got a couple of chances and a couple of minutes left, and I think maybe younger players maybe snatch at those sorts of chances, but thankfully a lot of Leicester's have fallen to more experienced players who don't lose their heads. So maybe that's a factor. I think it probably helped as well that they did go through a little bit of adversity towards the end of last season. I think for so much of last season, it was really comfortable, and it should have been really. I think it was kind of agreed that they probably had one of the best ever squads to play a championship season. But it got to the kind of springtime and they had a run of poor results. And whether overcoming that adversity to still get promoted has, almost proven to themselves that they, in bad moments they can still overcome them and still get over the line. I think that's all a positive. But it's probably been the biggest positive for me. I would say that they, no matter how many times they concede the first goal, and I think they've conceded the first goal more than any of the club in the division. You still feel like they've got a decent chance of getting at least a draw.
Well, hopefully, from a Newcastle point of view, they can put the game to bed in the first half and not have to worry about a Rampton Leicester City in the second 45. And just before we go on, just a reminder that this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. You can get a very special discounted offer on your NordVPN plan by hitting the link in the podcast description box. If you're thinking about your summer holiday already and you want to maybe try and get a bit of a bargain, there is a little bit of a tip. You can change your location to wherever you are thinking about going, and you might be able to get your hotel for that little bit of a cheaper price. So there's loads of benefits to the NordVPN plan, not just about keeping your personal details safe while online and using public Wi-Fi, but as we can see, you might get yourself a bargain ahead of next summer. So help support the podcast and click that link and keep yourself safe. We mentioned there, Jordan, the impact of Ruud van Nistelrooy. But the two games he's had have been at home. So this is a different task. It's coming to St. James's Park, which I know we're biased up here, but when everyone's pulling in the same direction, it is a horrendous place to visit. And their record here is very good. Only, well, I keep saying that every home game, and then they end up getting beat recently. But West Ham, Brighton, and Man City, the only teams to get the better of them here in 2024. So how big of a challenge is it for Ruud van Nistelrooy? Do you think he... In terms of having his first two games at home, is that something he would have wanted to help him get settled in, or do you think maybe having an away game a little bit earlier in the run was something that he might have preferred?
No, I think the way it's panned out for him, I think he'll have been really happy. Obviously, that he was appointed. Wasn't appointed in time to manage the Brentford game. He was just on a watching brief in that game, which. Away at Brentford, Leicester lost 4-1 in the end, and I think
it happens to everyone. It happens to us all. Don't worry about it. It's
exactly.
fine.
Brentford have got the best home record in the division, so I think he's probably quite happy that his first game was at home to West Ham. You know, a fellow struggling side. That feels on paper like a nice first game for a new manager. The fact that he's managed to have a couple of home games and get two good results. Is the best case scenario to go into this first away game, which I know Brighton are doing very well. But I would say the fact that this is an away game probably does make it, his toughest test so far. So yeah, I think it's I think that I think the way it's panned out, I think they'll be happy with that, because I think they've managed to get a couple of results now that that build a little bit of confidence, so that they should. At least go to Newcastle with the sense that they can get something, which, maybe a few weeks ago, that kind of, they wouldn't have had that feeling within the squad.
Well, I imagine the feeling in the squads are very different. Leicester will be happy, it'll be positive, whereas the feeling in the Newcastle United squad, I imagine, is a little bit doom and gloom. It's something like two wins in the last 11. They've lost to teams that on paper they should not be losing to. So that'll be something that Van Nistelrooy and his team will be looking to exploit. And I know in this instance, everyone always says, "Oh, we'll just concentrate on ourselves." But I'm pretty certain that Nistelrooy will be well aware of the mood around the Newcastle camp at the moment. And I'm thinking that if we can get an early goal, get the crowd a little bit rattled, then it could end up being a very successful afternoon on Tyneside.
Yeah, I think certainly the game against West Ham, maybe there was an element of trying to play more direct at the very start of the game. Just, that first 5 minutes, obviously it worked out well for them and they got that goal. So yeah, maybe there'll be a similar approach, just to, okay, we want to keep the ball, but actually let's have a real go in the first 5 minutes. Play as many forward balls as you can. Just try to get under Newcastle's skin a little bit. I think it's always going to be considered. I think when a team isn't doing as well as either they should be or is hoped, and there is that kind of sense within a crowd, I think you've got to try to exploit that, even if that means changing from your usual tactics for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever. So yeah, I could see that being maybe part of the plan, that okay, well, we'll play like this, but first 5 minutes, let's just really go for it. Even if we take a few risks and leave ourselves a little bit exposed, just to try to, maybe, force the issue a little bit. So yeah, I'm really, Yeah, I think that's the thing, because I think there is so much that is unknown about how a Leicester team play under Van Nistelrooy still. I am really excited to see this as a game and to see how they cope with the first away game and to see how they approach it. So yeah, there are a number of ways that it could go, I think.
I think it's got the potential to be a very exciting game because in many ways this is a must-win for Newcastle United. Not necessarily because Eddie Howe's going to lose his job if he loses the game, but in terms of trying to get that feel-good factor around again. I mean, you probably saw the draw against Liverpool and everyone was on a high. They go to Brentford and perform absolutely just dreadfully. Obviously mentioned they've lost to West Ham when everyone was expecting them to pick up all 3 points because they had a brilliant run of results before the national break. And we've got Brentford in the Cup on Wednesday at home. Probably Newcastle's best chance of getting into Europe. Probably the best chance of obviously getting a trophy after all these years. So to lose on Saturday, heading into Wednesday, it's not a place Eddie Howe wants to be. And given the form and that they are 12th in the league, things aren't going too rosy. So it feels like a must win for many reasons. But I just am a little bit nervous, and I tell you why I'm nervous as well, because Jamie Vardy seems to have found, well, not just a second win, it's probably a third or fourth win, given he's 37, but he just looks like a man who just doesn't age.
It is, it's preposterous, really. I mean, there's probably a few times where I've gone, yeah, this is the start of the end. And then, he just continually proves me and plenty of others wrong. He's already got 6 goals this season, which is double the amount he scored when Leicester got relegated 2 seasons ago. Despite being 2 years older, he's got 3 assists as well, and they've all been, exceptional quality. Anybody that saw the highlights from the Brighton game at the weekend, to have that kind of awareness and composure as a striker, you're bearing down on goal, just the goalkeeper in front of you, but just to, in the 90th minute, just to pass it across and give your teammate a tap in. It's just top level play, and he really is still a top level striker. I think the way Maresca used him last season, it kind of felt like, yes, he's still got the quality because he scored 20 goals last season, but he's probably not got the energy to play 90 minutes. I think he played 90 minutes all season in the Championship. I think he's already played 7 lots of 90 minutes this season. So he's still contributing towards the ends of games. As I mentioned, the assist for Deco Reed. He set up Ayew's 90-something minute equaliser at Ipswich as well. So he's still doing it throughout the game. His reading of he doesn't kind of hair around like he did sort of 10 years ago when Leicester won the title. He's not going to press and annoy defenders in that way by sort of chasing them down towards the corner flag or anything like that. But the timing of his runs is better. I think the way he finds space in the box is better. I think he's really matured in all those sorts of aspects. His touch is underrated. His awareness of teammates and his selflessness in the box is underrated. He's just a very, very good striker. Even turning 38 next month. So, it's for Leicester fans maybe thinking that, we need to enjoy what is Jamie Vardy's last season as much as possible. It might not be. He is he signed a 1-year contract. He was out of contract in the summer, signed a 1-year deal, which I think everyone kind of knew was coming. I think it would be odd if he scored 20 goals in a promotion campaign and didn't get a new contract. But I think the feeling was, okay, this is the final hurrah. But I would say the way he's playing, you're probably thinking he probably got another year in him. So, yes, he still is the most dangerous player, the most dangerous striker that Leicester have. But I would say Patson Daka is now fit and scored in Van Nistelrooy's opening game. Van Nistelrooy said after that game that he tried to sign him at PSV. He's a player he likes. He's a player that he has faith in. And I think because of that if things are going okay, I think we probably will see Daka on for Vardy at some point during Saturday's game. So Newcastle defence won't have to deal with him for 90 minutes, I don't think.
But we think he will start, despite the fact he's played all these games. Yeah, I mean, he's a proper wind-up merchant, isn't he? That's another thing I like about him. You know, he's very annoying when he's not your wind-up merchant, but when he is yours, I suspect you really do love him. And that's one of the other battles I'm really intrigued about. It's not just about him going up, whether it'll be Dan Burn or whether it'll be Fabian Schär in terms of, like, you know, the ball at his feet or those runs. You know, he can do nothing for most of the game and suddenly just turn it on like that and he's away. It's the kind of getting under the skin of the defenders. And if I was Jamie Vardy, I'd certainly be talking Fabian Schär, because I think Fabian Schär has a little bit of a short fuse, and he'll have to do his best not to get wound up by Jamie Vardy. But you mentioned a couple of other players. Is there anyone else Newcastle should be looking out for and keeping a particular eye on?
Well, I would say Buonanotte and El Canouse. Buonanotte's probably been Leicester's best outfield player this season, obviously on loan from Brighton. So I imagine, obviously, he was ineligible for the last game on Sunday against his parent club. So I imagine he will come back into the 11. Just a terrific dribbler. You know, one of those players that's a joy to watch when he moves with the ball. So he's very dangerous. El Canouse, £20 million summer signing, young Moroccan attacking midfielder. Bought for 20 million in the summer, and not started 2 games in a row until Van Nistelrooy came in. But he's started both of Van Nistelrooy's matches so far, and I can imagine he will play again. Scored and assisted against West Ham. Loves a through ball. He'll constantly be looking for those, which someone like Vardy, you know, I'm sure absolutely, loves. So, they're the 2 players that to watch, I would say, in terms of making things happen. And I think Leicester fans are happy that Van Nistelrooy is playing them both, or at least looks willing to play them both. They both start against West Ham when they were both eligible. So, they're the two to watch, I would say.
And in terms from a Newcastle United point of view, is there anyone that you're particularly thinking Leicester will be fearing on Saturday?
Isak is probably probably one of my favourite strikers to watch in the Premier League, if not the favourite. I do think someone like Gordon Leicester have had a lot of problems down their right-hand side this season. So if it's Gordon who's starting on the left wing, then I think he could get some joy. But I would say since Fass was dropped, the problem they had on the right-hand side, I think James Justin has got a fair amount of stick. But personally, I think the problem is that him and Fass, who was usually the right centre-back, didn't know how to play together, and that kind of lack of communication. Neither of them are bad individually, but just not being able to play together caused all sorts of problems. Since Cody's come in, even though he's a little bit slower, I do think that kind of area has shored up a little bit. But I would say Gordon. And then I'm naturally going to be worried about Barnes. I think if he comes on, if he starts, just because, this is nobody wants a former player to score against them. It seems to happen quite often, but particularly someone who, who came through the academy and is still very well liked at Leicester. I think a lot of the players that left after they were relegated, the feeling among supporters towards them wasn't great, even though, they were part of so many highs in terms of, playing in Europe, winning the FA Cup. People like Maddison and Tielemans, I think because it was felt that they'd underperformed, that Leicester had been relegated, and they'd just got their big moves to better clubs while Leicester were having to deal with the Championship. But I think Barnes' reputation wasn't really sullied by that, possibly because I think he did still play reasonably well in the relegation season. I think he was Leicester's top scorer in that season. Coming through the academy probably helps as well. But yeah, so I think there would be. Leicester won't want if Newcastle are going to score, they won't want it to be Barnes. Leicester fans won't want it to be Barnes.
Well, just talk to me briefly about Barnes because he's coming for quite a bit of stick. I don't think the price tag has helped. He is Newcastle United's top goal scorer this season. He scored against Brentford. He also gave the ball away for Brentford's second goal. But he has come for a bit of stick. You know, viewers of the podcast, listeners of the podcast know I still think he's going to come good. I still think he's going to prove that transfer fee was worth spending, but he has disappointed me this season because he's been given the chance to nail down that left to the extent where really Anthony Gordon's been played out of position to allow Harvey Barnes in many ways a free run at it, and he's just not taken it. And it's a little bit strange when you talk about Barnes and the criticism he has had, because a lot of people say, well, all he does is score goals and assists. All he did at Leicester was score goals and assists. And on one hand, you say, well, brilliant, that's all I want. But is his all-round play, something that that needs to improve to be in a top side? Essentially, can a team like Newcastle at the moment afford a luxury like Barnes, who doesn't do anything other than score and assist? I mean, that sounds really bizarre to say, but you kind of get what I'm getting at. So, have you seen the criticism and what have you made of it?
Yeah, I think I was intrigued by it because I know it's been a talking point as well that, in terms of maybe making Newcastle a little bit of cash, he might be the one to sell as well because Gordon is there. And I think Leicester fans are probably a little bit bemused by it because it does feel like when you're not watching Newcastle 90 minutes every single week, but you're still seeing Barnes pop up with goals fairly often, you would think, he must be doing pretty well. But you're right. I think that he was very similar at Leicester too. I think, he was never the best kind of team player in the sense of, helping out his fullback and things like that. That's never really been his game. But he was so direct and so kind of. I really liked him as a winger because he didn't care for any of the kind of flair and theatrics that you get with some wingers. Like some wingers, it feels like they get the ball and they wait for their fullback to get into position so that they can try and beat them with a step over. Barnes doesn't care about that at all. It's like his first touch will take him closer to the goal. And it's all about efficiency. And it's all about getting into positions where he can get a goal or an assist. And for Leicester, that really, he was a real big threat. And he did frustrate, and there were points where, fans were on his back a little bit, particularly when he first came into the team, because at that point, he not quite found that finishing touch. So essentially all his game was getting into really good positions and missing chances. But he then did improve that, and it felt like he scored fairly regularly, and he was involved at the top end. He very, very quick. He made things happen. So I suppose he's a very different player to Gordon, I would say, and I feel like maybe that's where the comparisons are from a Newcastle perspective, because they're both at their best on the left wing. I think if the game's tight and they're playing against a really good defense, I feel like Gordon would be a better player to rely on to make something happen. But if there's space to work in, I do think Barnes is a really effective player. And he's a Leicester lad. I've got to be nice about him. So, it's such a rarity that Leicester have a really good attacking player that grew up locally, came through the ranks. So he's, I think Leicester fans want him to do well. And, if Newcastle were willing to sell him at a decent price, they'd probably snap your hands off for him. So, but I think he'd probably be out of their price range this time around.
Well, there you go. I'm sure a lot of people in the comments will react to what you've said there. Penultimate question then. Just tell us, in a brief word or so, what do we expect from Ruud van Nistelrooy's team on Saturday? What can we expect in terms of, just what they're going to do?
Yeah, the one thing I think is probably important to mention at this point, we're recording this before the press conference, so the state of Leicester's midfield injuries are not totally clear, but Samare, who has been one of Leicester's starters in deep midfield under Van Nistelrooy, is suspended. And Ndidi, who's been the other starter, went off injured on Sunday. We're due to get an update about him. Harry Winks, probably be the next man in, has been injured for a couple of weeks. Wasn't in team training he was still doing individual training last week. So it's possible that Ollie Skipp and Hamza Chowdhury will be the starting midfield pair, which I know Hamza Chowdhury is a name that might get a reaction from Newcastle fans. I think I know they tried to sign him at least a couple of times, but I think there were maybe some tasty challenges maybe as well during games against Newcastle. But he's played 14 minutes in the Premier League all season and might now be put in for his first start just because of the injuries that Leicester have there. So that's probably going to be something to keep an eye on. As I mentioned before, Cody Vestergaard as a centre-back pairing, I think, is, they're better organised, but they are slower. So that's something to bear in mind. The Leicester play a system where when they're on the ball, the back four becomes a back three, and one of the full-backs will bomb down the wing and become like an extra winger. So that will probably be Christensen. It will probably be El Khanous will probably start on the left wing, but then will come inside and play as a second number 10 with Buonanotte, and Victor Christensen will get down the left wing. He's got the energy and stamina to do that very well, and he's looked okay, with his crossing and things like that since Van Nistelrooy came in. But he's another player who's perhaps come in for a bit of stick this season. So that's probably how they're going to play team wise. But I think the midfield is a big deal because Samare and Ndidi, both tall, physical players who have provided a lot of protection to the back four. Skipp and Chowdhury, both very energetic and willing to get a foot in, but perhaps not quite so able to dominate a midfield in the way that Samare and Ndidi can.
Yeah, Samari is another name that Newcastle United fans will remember. Steve Bruce was really keen on him. There was even a private jet ready to take him from Lille, but Samari turned it down. But in terms of Saturday, can we have your score prediction, please, Jordan?
I think I want to say Newcastle will win, which is probably a little bit pessimistic given my allegiances. But yeah, I'll say 2-1 to Newcastle. I think both teams will score at the very least. So maybe 1-1. But I think that extra bit of quality that Newcastle have in attack will get them the win. I'll say 2-1 to Newcastle and Isak to get at least one.
Well, I'm glad we've got at least one person on this episode going for a win. As you can tell, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I think the first goal is absolutely key. The earlier, the better for either side. It just feels like probably Newcastle's biggest game of the season so far, and I'm just a little bit fearful of it. I think it all comes down to, as well as we've discussed, how Leicester set up. They could really play it in Newcastle's hands, depending on their approach. So it's going to be so interesting to see how they do indeed set up, and we will obviously find out come 3:00 on Saturday. But Jordan, thank you very much for popping onto the podcast. Much appreciated to you guys watching and listening. You know what to do. Give the video a thumbs up. Share it amongst your Newcastle United supporting friends and family. If you're on the audio channel, thank you as always. Leave us a rating and review. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including the live blog covering this game on Saturday afternoon. Thank you as always, and we'll see you guys very soon.